these steps of how to be awesome, you got to know in your heart that you are marked by God. And because you are marked by God, you got to live like it. Live like it. Live like you are chosen by God. We oftentimes ask, do I matter in this world? Do I have value? Does God really care about me? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you why. Because as we look through the Bible, we see all throughout people that are marked by God. But there's always a process in achieving their purpose. It is never that people are marked by God and all of a sudden it's just like, hey, I'm the king of Israel. No, there's a process that we all have to go through. King David in the Bible, there was a process to the palace that he had to go through. And as you're on this journey, as you're going through, whatever the enemy cannot destroy, he will try to distract. And so there's going to be obstacles that will be thrown in your way that will try to destroy you, that will try to distract you from the process of achieving your purpose. Does that make sense? And so we are all on this journey. You are all marked by God, and you have to decide whether or not you're going to live into that. I played rugby. Jeremiah played rugby. Anyone else play rugby? No? Okay. We played rugby. And there was one day, I had a nice lion's mane when I played rugby. I grew my hair out, and this was me. There's a slide of it, of playing rugby. That was my high school career. And there was one game where I got a little prideful. And how many of you guys know Proverbs? Pride always comes before the fall. Exactly. So I got a little prideful. I ran a play and was running down, and I ran the same play. It was like the quarterback in a sense, 3 times in a row. And so, it was so bad. So 3 times in a row. So I go to run the same play again, and the guy who was defending me tried to cheat over because he was going to try to essentially get an interception. And as I noticed him cheating over, I held the ball back, and I watched him run by me as I kind of did a little juke move, and I laughed at him. I was like, ha, 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 sucker, I'm going to score. I'm going to score because this guy, I played him. It was perfect. It was the perfect play. So I do the juke move, I laugh at him, and I watch him extra long as he has this look of defeat like, oh, no, I fell for it. And I'm just laughing, and it's good. And then I turn around. I don't know where this 300-pound man came from. I kid you not, he was 300 pounds. There was a play that had happened earlier. I don't know how physics allows a man that large to move that distance that quickly. But I just remember looking, and he was right in front of my face, and he just went, ah, with his big forearms. And next thing I know, I am on my back looking up. I fumbled the ball. I'm trying to gain my composure. I stand up. I'm dizzy. I probably had a concussion. And I go to Coach, and I'm like, Coach, I got to get out. I can't even think right now. And he's like, Scott, we don't have any subs. You got to play the game. But my head hurts, Coach. I can't think straight. I got rocked so hard. And so I played the rest of the game. Whenever I got the ball, I'd pass it away just because I was so jacked from the hit that I wasn't expecting. And you see, it's the hit that hurts hardest. The hit that hurts hardest is the ones you don't see. Because when you can prepare for them, when you know they're coming, you can block, you can defend. But the ones you don't see coming hurt the most. And when it comes to life, and when it comes to achieving your purpose, there are hits that you kind of like, yeah, I know that's coming. But there are some times that hits come that you are not expecting, and they derail you from your purpose. And they take you back, and they force you like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And so what I'm going to try to do in the next couple minutes is help you foresee what types of obstacles are going to come in your way so that you can be prepared so that when the jabs come, you don't get knocked down. Fair enough? Okay. On your way to your purpose, when you are marked by God, here's a note. It will always be that you will be approved in private. You will be approved in private. That's the first point. If you're taking notes, you can write it down. You see, just because everyone doesn't know your purpose does not mean you are not marked by God. David, when he was marked by God, he was out tending the sheep. Samuel came and said, hey, I want you to anoint someone. So Samuel goes to Jesse's house and says, hey, I want to meet your sons because one of them is going to be the next king of Israel. Saddle up, sign me up, partner. So he goes to son number 1, big, strong, burly, Negatron. Goes to the next son. Hey, you're pretty good. No. Goes to the next son. Hey, no. All through his sons. No. So Samuel essentially goes to Jesse and said, either I heard from God wrong or you don't know how many sons you have because God told me one of your sons was going to be honored the next king and none of these are it. Jesse's like, well, There's the other guy. Doesn't even call him by his name. So there's the other guy. He's out tending the sheep. How often do you let people define you not by who you are, but by your shortcomings, and you live into that? Oh, there's the person who can't pass math. She's a failure. Oh, there's the awkward kid in fourth period. And we adopt these identities instead of taking the identity that God has given us. And so she calls in David, and they say, everyone hold. No one moves, no one sits down, no one touches a bread roll on the dinner table until I'm able to see this David. David comes in, he says, that's the man. You are anointed to be the next king of Israel. Now, I don't know what would happen in your head if some random guy showed up to your house and said, you're going to be the next king. That would go to my head. I would have to work very hard at not getting prideful. But you see, David, he took it and he understand that what God does in private, God will eventually make happen in public, and it is not your responsibility, but it is God's. And so David continued doing what he was doing. He didn't rush off to the palace and say, hey, I'm the next king. He went back to being a shepherd. Why? So often we're looking for direction from God. And God is saying, I've already given you what you need to do. If you haven't heard from God in a while, do the very last thing that he told you to do and keep doing that. Because until he gives you new information, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Now you might also be thinking, man, I don't know. I'm not King David. I'm just some random person. Here's what the Bible says in Romans 2:10. But glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good, the Jew first and also the Greek, for God shows no partiality. God doesn't care. God doesn't show favorites. God doesn't have favorites. God has marked us all for a purpose and a destiny. And the only question is whether or not you are going to spend enough time with him to live into that or not. So you can be like a David. You can be like a Samuel. You can be like these great men and women of faith in the Bible. Because God doesn't have favorites. He only has people who make themselves available to him. Are you making yourself available to God? You see, the Bible says God was always with David, and that's because David was always with God. Out in the pastures, out in the fields, David talked with God. He walked with God. Are you creating space in your schedule for God to be with you? So first, he was approved in private. Second, he was anointed before being appointed. That flows. He was anointed before being appointed. You see, he went back to his sheep. He started doing his thing. He was herding them. And he recognized that in that time, the waiting game is what's important. He waited on God. He continued to do what God had called him to do. And some of us, when we wait for God, we go into this, God, why is this happening to me? What's going on? And so are you waiting by complaining, or are you waiting like a server? How may I help you? What can I do? God, I'm at your service. Because when God has a destiny for you, no man can stop it. But you can. You can choose no. You can choose to walk away from it. How are you waiting? In verse 16:21, David came to Saul and entered into his service. Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. David served Saul. An armor bearer isn't just someone who holds a sword. It was like someone who was so close, they would give their life, they would protect, they would defend at all costs. David served his leader with all of his heart. Many times in life, our expectations do not match our experience. We expect some grand thing to happen. We expect this grand miracle. We expect to be elevated, but our experience is that we're still struggling. And it is in the waiting time that you develop the skills you need for when you're on the platform. It is in that time of waiting that you develop the skills. Let me explain. Point 3 is when you're marked by God, you become an answer to a problem. You become an answer to a problem. As you're waiting, you develop skills. You're doing your life, you're doing the normal, whatever it is, whether it's you play guitar, you play piano, or you're doing the dishes and you get real fantastic at doing the dishes. Whatever it is that you do, you develop skills, and it is those skills that God uses to elevate you. Because here's what's happened. Saul started being tormented, and all these evil spirits started tormenting him, and one of his his chief officials said, hey, what if we get someone to come in here and play music to help ease your soul? And so they're like, hey, let's do it. Well, do you know anyone that plays music? He's like, I don't know. Then one guy's like, hey, there's this guy who's out in the shepherd fields. I think he plays a mean harp. You know, it's like the modern day guitar, right? He just goes to town on this harp. Let's get him. And so they go out and they call David. And instead of David going to King Saul and saying, hey, I'm the next king, you need to let me in. You see, God calls him and draws him out. When you are following God, they will send for you. You do not need to elevate yourself to a position of power. You do not need to wave your own flag. You do not need to force yourself into higher positions. God will take care of that. You have to do what God has asked you to do. You have to continue to develop your skills so that when you are called upon to play the harp, when you are called upon to rise up, you will be ready. Now here's a cool principle in this. David came as an answer to a problem. And if you want to know how to level up in leadership, how to really take that next step, find out what torments your leaders and torment them. By David coming in and playing the harp, he tormented Saul's tormentors. And in that, he gained a position of status that was God ordained. What torments your leaders? For all of you guys who were in our parents' homes in some form or fashion, what torments your parents? I know some of you guys go home and those dishes have not been done in weeks, and those dishes torment your parents. What would it look like for you to just take it upon yourself to torment those dishes, to handle business? You think, oh, Pastor Scott, that's really funny. That's a good analogy. I'm serious. Go home and do the dishes. Go home and serve your parents. Because when you torment the things that torment your leaders, it's a way that God uses to elevate your position as you lean into your purpose. The last thing is a little bonus point. Bonus point. Opportunity will be wrapped in obedience. Opportunity will be wrapped in obedience. So as you're on your way to living your purpose, remember that you are approved in private, that you are anointed before you are appointed. God will work things through, and that you are an answer to problems. So develop the skills you have today so that you'll be prepared to answer that problem when it comes up in the future. And as you're walking in that, you will I guarantee it, you will face obstacles. And those opportunities will be wrapped in the obedience of how you respond to those obstacles. Here's what happened in David's life. He's back shepherding sheep. He's doing his thing. And Dad says, hey, I need you to go deliver this cheese over to your brother. And he's like, these grilled cheese sandwiches? Sure. He's delivering these grilled cheese sandwiches over to your brother. And he's like, Dad, I'm not DoorDash. It's not even invented yet. I'm over here in the king's palace playing music and playing my jams. That's beneath me. What would happen if he said that? If he would have said that, he would have never met the opportunity that catapulted him into his destiny. So instead, he said, the last thing God called me to do was to be a shepherd and to be obedient. So, okay, Dad, I'm going to be obedient, deliver the grilled cheese sandwiches, and be the original DoorDash. So he goes over, and upon going over, he finds that thousands of people were up against this guy named Goliath, and all of them are too scared to act. And David says, what? Too scared to act? He's just a man. Let's do something about it. And they were all terrified. They're like, what do you mean? You're just a kid. You can't do anything about it. What are you going to do? But what they did not realize was that while they were out being afraid of Goliath, David had been approved in private. And he had continued to live his day-to-day life. And you know what happened in his day-to-day life? Taking care of sheep, he came up against a bear. And he had to learn how to defeat a bear. And he developed use with the sling and with stones and was able to kill a bear to get off. And then he encountered a lion. He developed skills of how to take out a lion. If you've taken out a bear and you've taken out a lion, I don't care how tall the guy is, it's not a lion. For David, coming up against Goliath was not something new. It was not something terrifying out of the ordinary. It was in line with what he had already been doing in the secret place. And so when he was called to do it, on a stage, he was prepared. He was not pretending to be someone that he wasn't. It was merely everyone else recognizing who he had been for the last several years. If he had not been obedient to his father, the opportunity to walk into his destiny would have never happened. And so as you're pursuing your purpose, as you're leaning into that, there's going to be a lot of mundane. There's going to be a lot of obstacles. But that does not mean you are not called. That does not mean you are not qualified. It means that God is developing skills in you today that are going to be activated tomorrow. And oftentimes we get too frustrated with the short-term game because it's like, oh, I need it now, I need it now. We get frustrated, and so we stop and we quit. What I'm saying is, don't quit. You have been marked. Get that in your heart and your spirit. Because as being marked by God, there's a destiny awaiting for you, both today and tomorrow. I'm going to call up Pastor Ramel. I'm going to ask him a few questions. David took a step forward because of the opportunity that was placed in front of him. Do we have another mic back there? If there is, let's send it up. And God taught him some things. And I want you to hear from Pastor Ramel a few key questions as to how he, in his own life, responded to God's call in his life. So first, Ramel, tell us a little about yourself. And tell us in that, was there ever a step that you had to take in obedience to God that didn't make sense at the time, but later you see, man, God was preparing me for something more?
And just standing and listening to this dialogue of David just reminds me of exactly that, these steps of obedience that God had set before me. And that major step of obedience for me was when I was being called to be the pastor for Santa Cruz. So I am the site pastor for Santa Cruz. But that process was a process of obedience. You guys, kid you not, about 2 years of obedience. 2 years. 2 years of me running away from the call, running and avoiding people who were calling me, people coming up in my face saying, hey, you're called by God. I said, no, I'm not. Hey, no, bro, you got to do this. This is it, right? You're marked by God. No, I'm not. And it wasn't until obedience happened that God started to move in my life in a real way. And I don't think it doesn't speak to me in my age or where I was at in my life. What it speaks to, a common experience to all of us. No matter how old or how young we are, that we're being called to a point of obedience. Just like Pastor Scott said, there's things to learn there. And I love this story about David, because when you read the story of David from 1 Samuel all the way to 2 Samuel, from slaying Goliath all the way to he was appointed as king finally by God, he learned a whole lot of stuff. And he did it in cool and creative ways, just like you guys are doing things in cool, creative way, and just like I'm excited about being a part of to keep doing cool and creative things here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask, when did you first see God start using your skills for his kingdom purposes?
It's interesting. My role here at Cathedral of Faith is multifaceted, and one of the facets is the Family Life Center. So I'm also the director of the Family Life Center. God has given me gifts and talents in the realm of health and fitness. So I am by trade a strength and conditioning specialist, and he's gifted me in a way to help people through injuries, people that take hard hits that they don't see because they're being prideful. After you fall,
Pastor
I help
Ramel
you get up.
helped me rehab after I destroyed my knee.
That's right, we did. So it's an exciting opportunity, and it has been, for him to use my gifts and my talents to elevate me to a place where I can use then the gospel through my gifts and talents to minister to people in ways that they never thought they needed. And they knew they needed physical healing. They know they need to get in shape physically. But what I bring then is the opportunity to learn how we can be healthy and whole spiritually as well, being healthy mind, body, and spirit. So God's been faithful there for me and drawn me here to this place today.
One last question. When did you first realize you were marked by God? You came to know Jesus, and there was this activation in your spirit.
Oh, my goodness, what a great question. Because it requires a great response. And that great response is this. I was marked by God, and I sensed that mark by God the moment my children came into my life. I know it seems like a long place to be, but there's a difference between doing life the way you know it, the way God's created you, and you know you can handle it. Up until that point, I knew I was doing it all on my own. But once the kids came, once people like you came into people's life, like your parents' lives, you realize that I can't do this by myself. I can't do this alone. And I realized at that moment in time that I was marked by God to be a father to the fatherless. I was there to be a husband to the broken. And in that moment, I realized what it means to be marked by God and to bring healing and wholeness into this thing we call family.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no
Would you give
problem.
Pastor Ramel a hand? I'm excited. Go ahead and stay up here. I'm excited for you guys to get to know him over the next few months. There is so much wisdom in him. He helped mentor my wife, both mentally and physically, that would help her to become a Marine. He's mentored me. And now you guys have the opportunity to be blessed by an amazing man of God and his wife, Aurora. You'll get to meet her. So I'm excited for what God's going to do in you. As we close, I want you to close your eyes, and we're going to pray for you. I want you to think about what it is to be marked by God. And I'm going to reread this verse in John. It says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." God chose you. And he appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. You have been marked. The only question is whether or not you're going to lean into him or not. When you face the struggles, when you face the doubts, when you face the insecurities, remember that God has called you and created you for such a time as this. And there is greatness that he wants to awaken and activate inside of you. And so if you say, Pastor Scott and Pastor Ramel, I want to take that next step in just activating and awakening. I want to lean into that. I want to lean into what it means to be marked by God. I want you to raise your hand. And we're going to pray with you specifically to say, hey, we're going to pray for that marking. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to pray for everyone now. Lord, as we come before you, God, you have marked us for such a time as this, and you're stirring in the hearts of some of us. I pray that as we go from here, God, that we will lean into you, that we will listen to you, that we will continue to do what you have called us to do